Well, hello and welcome back, everybody, to the DanJohnUniversity.com podcast. I'm Dan John. Good for me. It's episode 188. My voice is a little crumbly today because of a workshop, 2-day workshop in New Jersey. One of the things, before I start on that, hey, remember, if you have questions, email them to the podcast. And the email address is podcast@DanJohnUniversity.com. I do my best to answer each and every question. Recently, we had a big increase in the number of questions. So I'm trying to answer a few of them personally back to people as best I can. And on the other hand, I also occasionally will combine a few things just to make things a little more seamless. One thing I did want to say about workshops, it's funny, before COVID, I was probably doing, 40 workshops a year. One year it was 40. So, on an average, it would have been about half the year I'd be gone. I'd be gone in sometimes 2, 3, 4 weeks in a row, almost always 2 months, 2 weeks a month. And I was in workshop teaching condition, in workshop shape. What's funny is since I started doing workshops again, I've noticed that my voice needs to be practiced again. And I forgot how hard it is to stand, walk, demonstrate, teach, yell, whistle, critique, evaluate 8, 9, 10 hours a day for 2 days. So it's a good lesson for me because it reminds me of something my daughter Kelly and I have talked about a number of times. And we call it teaching condition. In the July, you're sitting around the pool and you're like, oh, life is great. And then all of a sudden one day in August or September, you open a door and, 40 kids walk into your room and you have to be on every second for the next 190 days, 188 days or whatever. So it's fun. One thing I would think about, if you are following a person online and you respect their work, ask them about workshops. A lot of people who are experts in the field don't do workshops. And I've always wondered about that because it gives you and you coming and seeing me at my workshop and me having a chance to interact with you, the clarity I get talking to people one-on-one and the mistakes that I make as a writer, as a podcast person, and even in these other non-hands-on coaching situations, the workshops allow me to get better clarity about what I'm telling and what I'm teaching. So it's just something you want to think about. And I know a lot of people don't like doing workshops because they look different in real life. We'll just leave that here. Episode 188 begins with a very good question from Mike. It's this: I'm more interested these days in finding exercises for good general fitness that also have a low risk of injuries. Agreed. I guess that's the, Mike, before we even answer the question, I guess that would be the perfect risk to benefit thing. I also would always include clarity on that. The clarity of teaching something. Your point is great. What are the best exercises with the least risk? That's always a good question. I've got a number of your books, thank you. And I'm loving your recent Easy Strength Omni book, thank you. Available at easystrengthomnibook.com. Come on, people, buy that book. It's not selling well. And then I'll get little quote points in the comments. I'm waiting for it to be in print. And I'm going to give you a piece of advice. With shipping costs the way they are right now, it'll be cheaper for you to get the PDF, take it over to one of these office places, have them bind it for you. I had one person tell me and showed me the copy and was like, well, that's better than what that service based on river and northern and southern America can do, at a much more reasonable price too. And I was wondering if you could address what you found to be the dangerous exercises one should really avoid. It's a good question, There's a lot of things in life it's kind of a good idea to avoid. Let's see what we can do here. For example, I'm a rower, and a common test used to be a timed bench press for reps. For rowing, I don't see that. until the high-end programs figured out it causes too many rib injuries from forcibly hitting the bottom of the bench while laying on it. Let me just add one other thing. The bench press is the only exercise I know that kills. When I was young, a guy in San Francisco died bench pressing alone. A couple of years ago, my friend Dan Martin told me about a case. His son was involved. His son's a detective, and they found a man dead doing bench presses for his little video camera. So yeah, this is really a good question. I know this depends on the experience of the person, but what sort of exercises are just too risky, in your opinion, to do in a home gym, like bench press, for example? Are there others to avoid in the kettlebell world? Oh, I like that. So are there home exercises with kettlebells you should avoid? Here's the funny thing. In 1974, I read an article by Dave Davis that if you combine the power lifts and the Olympic lifts, you basically have a perfect discus and shot put throwing program. And if you look at the programs from the late 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and really up to today, it's still that way. Having said that, the bench press, the deadlift, the back squat, the Olympic clean and press, it's not been around since 72, the snatch and the clean and jerk are all marvelous exercises, but done incorrectly, they can wreck you. And I mean wreck you. I've had surgeries because of missed lifts. I'm not proud of it. As great an exercise as the deadlift is, if you don't have the body type that fits as the height of the bar off the ground, it can wreck you. Squats are great, but boy, I tell you, I just saw a video online of a guy crashing and burning, doing a squat, and I don't even know how they did it. The workout shall not be named guy did snatches, and it was a poorly designed setup, and he really hurt himself badly on his back. So as much as I love the Olympic lifts and the power lifts, those exercises done poorly are very not good. Please write that sentence down and memorize it. In a home gym setup, I think you should really have safety as one of the issues. But I always teach, like with discus throwing, safety equals performance. With kettlebells, safety equals performance. If a whole bunch of us go out to a field, I'm probably the safest thrower there because I'm going to keep it inside the sector and it's going to go basically in a straight line. The person who's never seen it before picks it up and throws it into the crowd. Their lack of ability makes them less safe, if you're following my point. So as you go to workshops, as you have some feedback, as you have some coaching, some training, as you practice, you're going to get a better and better and better lift. You're going to get more out of the lifts. You're going to get more out of your training, and you're going to be safer for yourself. In the kettlebell world, the ones it's pretty simple. The lifts I would avoid training by yourself, generally like the bent press. We used to joke at my gym, how do you know someone's training for the second cert, the RKC? Because how do you know they're injured? Because they're training for the second. Training for the bent press seems to hurt a lot of people. Now, I've worked very hard in the last few years to come up with a toolkit that's safer. I've worked, we do a lot of kneeling windmill work, a lot of real safe movements, a lot more band work, a lot more rope work, a lot more hand on fist teaching. So if something goes wrong, the bell isn't pulling you out and popping your shoulder a little bit. So the kettlebell bent press, I'm for the 9 people in the world who enjoy it, keep doing it. Good for you. Boy, I tell you, some of the windmills I watch people do online or even in live, very dangerous. The windmill is a hip hinge with an intelligent twist, and the windmill is a wonderful exercise for assessment, which is, by the way, why I like the Turkish get-up. Is it's probably one of the best everyday assessments you can do. I know this when when I go to the floor in a Turkish getup, I get all kinds of insights about the plane flight or the car ride or the Olympic lifting or the touch football game I played 2 days before. I'll start to go down and I'll be like, oh, I am racked up here, and I'll spend more time, doing mobility or, whatever, foam rolling or whatever I need to do, hanging from a bar, whatever I need to do. So let's go this. So bent press, if you're good at it, you're probably safe in a home gym-ish. Windmills done correctly should be safe. Turkish get-ups can be done. If you're trying to win the internet, I can't recommend it. But if you're using them as an intelligent assessment, as a whole body movement, a whole body workout, I'm with you. I would avoid. I hate double kettlebell snatches. I don't see any value to them. I don't like you have to put them up ballistically and then you have to catch it. I don't see a lot of even good people do them right. As an Olympic lifter, I've snatched 142.5 kilos, 314 pounds. And yet when I do double 24s with the double kettlebell snatch, I put those overhead and there's a moment of pause like, wow, I always have to have a moment when I hit that position where I kind of go, I wouldn't say I panic, but it's like, boy, if you do these badly, this will go badly. So the more advanced lifts, and in fact, I would say the whole RKC2 cert, done correctly, every one of the exercises is very good, done correctly. And that's what it comes down to, Mike. And are you going to do, if you're going to do the cert, you're going to take the time to learn the movements and maybe teach other people, yeah, they're fine. But if not, I would avoid them. So what would be a great kettlebell workout? Well, I have this one workout I call the perfect workout. Half kneeling presses, you hang, you do hip thrusts from the floor, you do goblet squats, and you do march in place with suitcase carries. In my experience, that little group of exercises is almost, there's no such thing as, no guarantees of it, but they're pretty much injury-free. They're fairly dummy-proof. They all have their own built-in warning systems. If you're doing a half-kneeling kettlebell press and as you go up, you start to fall, it's, you bring the bell back down and say, "Whoa, let's reset. Let's get those feet back on the ground. Let's lock and load." So there are exercises that can be more dangerous than others. Done correctly, with appropriate warm-up, with appropriate arousal and tension levels, with good equipment in an appropriate setting. I don't know of we can mitigate any of the dangers of the exercises, I think. But it takes the discipline to put together, to have the good equipment, to have the proper instruction, to have, to be warmed up, to be prepared physically and emotionally over, anywhere from 2 weeks to 12 weeks. Those are the keys. So Mike, like almost anything, anything in the gym can be dangerous if you're foolish. Anything in the gym can be safe if you take the time and energy to do them correctly. I know basically I just said a whole bunch of nonsense in a way. Everything I just said is, well, of course. But my number one coaching principle in my Coaching 101 course, excellence is obvious. Success is obvious. The concepts are obvious. Obvious is the most important thing a coach can have. So when you want to deal with things like safety, when you want to deal with things like any kind of performance, obvious is what you want to focus on. And it's obvious that safety is important. So there you go. So obviously, I hope you learned something from this question. I cracked myself up. Okay, well, next question comes from Davis, and he says, what is your opinion on training the Olympic lifts using Grease the Groove? I love it. In fact, I wish, as an Olympic lifter, instead of training for 3 hours a day at Dick's gym, I wish we'd have done something like a morning session of snatch and clean and jerk, an around lunch session of snatch and clean and jerk, and then our hard workout snatch and clean and jerk. When we were at discus camp with John Powell and Dennison, we used to get up in the morning before breakfast and do, we used to tell people the schedule. I'll give you the schedule. As parents always say, well, what's the schedule? Okay, ready? Throw, eat, throw, eat, throw, eat, throw. At the end of those 6-7 days, the athlete would get in the ring and could go left-handed, right-handed, could go this, do that, could do extra spins, could do anything we asked, because we greased the groove for an entire week. So yes, I do think greasing the groove is a better way to learn the Olympic lifts and do the Olympic lifts. I had a chance to talk to a Bulgarian coach one time, an actual Bulgarian coach, Olympic lifting coach, and they just shake their head when we tell them what we think they did. They had basically workout maxes, and yet you would go for maxes for that workout in the same way as a discus thrower. I have discus thrower maxes. I actually learned this coaching technique a long time ago, where you have the athlete throw, warm up and then throw the discus as best they could that day. And then we would back off, usually about 20 feet, and then have the thrower try to hit. So the athlete throws 180, give them 6 attempts, they get to 180. Then you back off to 160 and see how easy you can throw 160. Well, the weirdest thing about the way the nervous system works, after a few attempts, when you finally get to 160, throwing 160 is so easy. Throwing 160 is so easy, the discus starts to go farther and farther and farther. And you say to the athlete, hey, I'm asking you to throw it easy and you're throwing 180. And that's when the athlete goes, wait, I'm throwing my best easy, right? And I think that's the secret, if you will, to greasing the groove, is that you teach the nervous system, this is what I want you to do. And then after the while, the nervous system says, oh, I got it. I see what you're saying. In the same way you learned how to type, I'm a very good typer. But I can remember back in, I don't remember her name, at Southwood Junior High, Barbara, her first name was Barbara, and she later became superintendent, Barbara Jacobs, Mrs. Jacobs, teaching us how to type. And we were, put your fingers on home row, and then you went A, other letter, and we went boom, 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 dun, 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 and you had to type these little triangles and patterns with your fingers over and over and over. Funny thing is, I can't tell you where the letters on a keyboard are anymore. I can't find them because my fingers know where they are. So if I look at the keyboard while I'm typing, I slow down immensely. But my fingers know exactly where to go. I can type and talk to you at the same time because I've been typing for so long. I've been typing, for 50 plus years. Well, if you tell me to type faster, type faster, type faster, type faster, it's not going to make me type faster. If I let my fingers do the walking, I get things typed out very quickly with very few errors. If I think about it, I start typing the T-E-H instead of T-H-E. That's the first sign for me for thinking, is when I start typing T-E-H. The same thing happens, I think, when it comes to strength, and I think it's probably one of the most underappreciated areas, Davis, of getting strong, is this idea of teaching the nervous system what to do. That's why I think easy strength works, is that instead of having one dose of deadlifts once a week, you deadlift 5 times a week. And you learn what you're asking, the body learns what you're asking it to do. If it comes to something like the Olympic lifts, which is even more elegant and more complex, if you will, the more times you snatch, the more times you clean and jerk, the better. Phil Maffetone has a new book on strength out, and he's got a part of the book where he recommends doing overhead squats. It's, every hour, 8 reps every hour on the hour. 8 times a day, you pop over to the corner and you do some overhead squats. Well, you're going to get good at overhead squats if you every hour on the hour overhead squat. I think it'd be an interesting way to learn how to snatch, to train the snatch. If I just set my bar up, which I can do, and I don't know, because I love your idea. I don't know why I'm not doing it. I believe the word is laziness. But I could go in my garage 8 times a day and snatch. It would be no problem at all. It'd be interesting by hour 6, 7, and 8, when I would probably have my nervous system lit up. Load would be interesting, and how my body would respond to it with mobility and flexibility would be interesting. And I'm not sure how that would go. But Davis, if you try it, I support it. 8 might be too many. Pat Flynn has a fat loss program where you train twice a day. I've trained twice a day in the weight room many times in my life. I think that's probably pretty good. Be great to see 3. 8 might be at the top end. 2 would be minimum. Try it out and get back to me. Fun question, Davis. Okay, thank you. Okay, here we go. And next question is lovely, lovely name. His name is Daniel. He says this: what do you think of the relationship between the hinge and the hip thrust? Well, I think the hip thrust is a hinge. So let's just leave it there. One thing that I guess I'll just have to use a pen here, but with the hip thrust, okay, this would be your feet. Let's just say there's your head. When you're at the top, that your glutes become the thing that holds the whole structure up. Okay, does that make sense? Your glutes are what keep you on top. And when you do swings, when you hit the top, your glutes drive you in there, and then your structure on a swing is what keeps you tall. So obviously you're squeezing your glutes, your quads, your feet are grabbing the ground, your abs are engaged, your lats are engaged, and all that. But the engine that holds you in the glute bridge now, so the hip thrust becomes a glute bridge when you do it into an isometric, is your glutes. This way it's going to be explosive hip bang, and then it's going to come right back for another rep. Okay, so the structural difference between the vertical swing and the horizontal-ish hip thrust is going to be a little bit different on how we're going to hit the glutes. I like using isometrics to train everything in the body. So that's why I think hip thrust should be part of the package of training in the kettlebell world too, because it gives you a chance to feel with time what the top of a swing should feel like. Oh, but that's not your question. Oh, I did answer. Okay. Are they in the same family? Yes. Can one temporarily or permanently replace the other? Yeah. Yes. Okay. So if someone's struggling with swings, I have them stop swinging immediately because I don't want them to do crappy ballistic moves. It's hard on the body. And we regress back to either grinding hinge movements, Bulgarian goat bag swing, the waiter's bow, the Romanian deadlift stretch. Those are my 3 favorites. The deficit deadlift done swing style, if you have to have a good eye, and the person doing them has to be disciplined, that your training would have to be disciplined, because you're just hinging, you're not deadlifting. You could do that. If those don't work, I move to the hip thrust, the glute bridge, and that thing we used to call the pelvic tilt, which is much more of a just squeeze it's a way to practice bringing the pelvic bowl underneath the rib cage. It's you squeeze the butt cheeks and tighten the abs. These little movements like this, and if you have to go back to that, that's fine too. It's still a good exercise. You can even do it while you're standing in line. Just squeeze your glutes. I guess you could do that. I don't know. Does the hip thrust have to be loaded if doing heavy hinges? You ask a good question. And the question inside the question is this: can hip thrusts replace swings? Can swings replace hip thrusts? I would say, if you have to, you're going to be sent to this prison where all they have is hip thrust machines. You probably would be fine. And your friend gets sent to another prison where they just have kettlebells. I think you would both be fine. I think the answer is in the doing in both cases. So the one thing I do like about the hip thrust, and that's why I like to use bands as my resistance, because the bands are constantly, it's their job to pull you back down. And so I don't even have to coach. On a glute bridge with bands, I know that the bands, you're fighting against the band's tension just with the glute wall. Well, I'm sure other things too. With the kettlebell swing, when you hit that position, it's boom, boom. There's a thing in the orchestra called a kettle drum. Boom, 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 boom. And I like that image of doing kettlebell swings. Boom, 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 boom. With the hip thrust, you have a chance to stop at that top position. Now, stopping at the top, sometimes it's called racing the bell, can be done with the kettlebell swing, but the bell is coming down and you're playing, we used to say, playing chicken with it, okay? I don't think you asked an either or question here, okay? I don't think you did. If you come to my gym and you train with me, you'll do hip thrusts and swings. You will do both. I get, this is what we do. There are people who get more out of the hip thrust, and there probably are a lot of people who get more out of the kettlebell swing. It kind of depends on what you're going through. It would be interesting. I do that 10,000 swing challenge thing, and it would be interesting to do the 10,000 swing challenge idea with the hip thrust, because I think it's pretty possible to knock out sets of 50 in the banded hip thrust without thinking too hard. But doing 500 hip thrusts a day for 20 days, I don't know. I've never done it, so I couldn't tell you, but there might be a real interesting thing that comes out of it. One, I would imagine, is that your posture would improve. I don't know if you get it. I don't know if there's any injuries you could get doing it. There's always equipment failure issues with injuries. A band breaks, or you catch a finger, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, I don't like the idea of replacing either one. Both of them have great value. If you're currently not doing one or the other, add it into your program. And I love having hip thrusts and swings in the same training day. I think it attacks the glutes and the whole system from two different directions. And that's pretty good. That's not bad. Someone was telling me not long ago that the value of doing suspension trainer push-ups and then like a bench press or a one-arm bench press or whatever, was this ability to attack it from, using gravity from two different directions. And I thought that was an interesting thing. But in the hip thrust swing thing, it's completely two different directions, which is, I don't know, kind of a fun idea to kick around. Good question. And Daniel, of course, lovely name. And I appreciate you asking it. Both. Got a question from Sam. I'm sorry about all the coffee and everything. It's just rough voice from the weekend. Got a question from Sam. He does tree work. And I every so often hire people to trim my trees. I got trees that are estimated to be 75 to 80 years old in my backyard. And I want to keep them around as long as I can because they're so thick and they're just amazing. So I hire you good people and I watch them work. And it's one of those jobs when you watch the guy rope climb up with an attached chainsaw around on his waist. And then he gets up there and he pulls it out and turns it on. It's an exhausting job to just watch. So I can only imagine what it's like in real time. It's tough on the body, Sam says, and I'm 40 this year. I'm fairly fit and strong in some ways from the job, but want to do easy strength to help me with my body, keep my body more resilient so I can keep doing this work in old age in some capacity. I find it tough to get 3 sessions a week in. Sometimes I'm really tired from lifting logs, chainsawing, and climbing trees. Could 2 sessions a week still yield good results? Also, any tips for holding focus and motivation for a challenge that say is a year away? Well, that's a bunch of different questions. I wrote a book called Easy Strength Omnibook, and it's brilliant. I talk about 2 days a week in the book, and yes, it is possible. I talk about my friend Jorn Svensson, who I trained with a lot in the early 90s. He sadly died far too young, but we were talking about training, and he said one day that he only lifted 2 days a week. Well, he's an international level discus thrower, only training 2 days a week. And so I started following his good advice, and I started making some of the best progress in my life. I don't remember exactly the workout. I think it was this. On day 1, we did snatches and bench press, and day 2 of the week was front squats and cleans. And I think that's exactly what it was. We did a few, we did some med ball work, and we did some standing long jumps and standing double leg hops and stuff like that. But that was basically it. Well, what happened? Well, I had the best season of my life, and I wouldn't get that good again until 2004 to 2008. So from 1991 to 2004, I stalled, which is funny when you think about it. And the reason I stalled is because I got away from that intelligent kind of work. So would 2 days a week be good? Yes. With what you're doing, I would suggest not worrying about loaded carries. You do them on your career path. You'd even have to think about vertical pulling, whether or not you need it, because if you're climbing rope every day, you might not need the vertical pull. I would suggest still keeping a vertical push. I get the sense you're an American, and I don't know why I think that. But the vertical push is always good for Americans. It might be a good thing to do horizontal rows. Now, the problem with horizontal rows in Easy Strength, or any program, is doing it correctly. So I would suggest single hand rows, and make sure you put your hand, if you're doing them from a suspension trainer, this might not be enough load, but if you're doing that on a suspension trainer, make sure your heels are together, your knees are together, and that you keep your chin, sternum, and zipper line straight. Don't roll away, turn away. Just keep it as locked in as you can. If you're doing them with a dumbbell or kettlebell, I would suggest doing them with a bench, and put your left, if you're doing them with your right hand, put your left hand and your left knee on that bench. Make sure you get yourself into a hinge position, flex, and then here's the rule. When you bring the bell up, make sure the thumb gets into the armpit for a count or 2 on every rep, and then slowly descend it down. Pull up, 1, 2, slowly descend. It's really going to cut into the amount of load you get, but I think it's going to train. You need time under tension in this position for most men I work with. So a vertical press, try these row ideas. I wouldn't mind you doing some extra goblet squats, like in the warm-up, or whatever squat you do as a warm-up. Depending on the load you have to deal with at your work, I think a deadlift variation would be fine, but please, at your age, do them from the rack. And I would say just 2 inches above the knee, and just hinge them up. Hinge them up. So goblet squat warm-up, vertical press, one-arm rows, deadlift variation. You might even want to look at the Jefferson deadlift. Now, if you do that, then it's 1 set left, 1 set right, and you're done, okay? And then, generally I say go for a walk, but whatever you think you need after that, if because your job is so physical, if you're going to do any cardiovascular work, I mean, I'd prefer you do something like swimming or bike riding or something like that. Something that takes the load off your joints. This is very specific to Sam right now because he works up and down in trees. With all that climbing, with all that, and I've seen you guys work. You know, you're picking up those stumps and you're carrying them to the shredder. You're throwing them into the shredder. You're doing this. You're doing that. Anything that makes you feel good for long, slow cardio is something I would give my approval. That could be swimming. I mean, it could be paddleboarding. It could be kayaking. Whatever feels good and makes you happy for your cardiovascular work. And I think you can make it work twice a week. There are benefits of training more days a week, but there's also benefits of just getting in the gym and getting it done for a while. Great question, and I'll just say from the heart, I really appreciate your I really appreciate your job, because you guys have come to my house and saved me many times. I think there is climate change as a Utahn. I even think that even my neighbor, who's a little bit different, is starting to think so too. The winds we're getting in Utah now are so violent. So I have to, I really have to keep an eye on my trees. And then watching you guys climb up them and then carry that stuff out is just amazing. So be sure to take care of, your lifting, sure. And then for your cardio, go gentle, go long. Okay, thank you. We got a question from Sebastian. And Sebastian has a question that I like because it takes me back to 1971. You've spoken very highly of Olympic lifting. I tend to, yeah. And I see value in it. However, whenever I Olympic lift, my joints hurt afterwards. Yeah, well, I think your joints are telling you something. My knee from landing in a deep squat and bouncing out of the hole, and my wrist from holding a snatch overhead and the clean in the rack. And Sebastian has already answered his own question here, which makes me very happy. I like it when people answer their own questions in the questions, because then I say, yes. Are there any movements I can do that have the same whole body benefits of Olympic lifting? And now listen to this. As an avid kettlebell lifter, can I simply do clean and press and snatch as kettlebell movements? I don't feel like the benefit is the same. What do you recommend? You already answered your question. Yes. So it's interesting how you said you don't feel the benefits are the same. If it's not hurting your joints and it's not hurting your wrists, then there are benefits. Yeah, I will say this. I mean, last Friday I was getting ready to head off to a kettlebell workshop. And I got up early in the morning to get my snatches and clean and jerks in, Olympic barbell. And I don't know what it was, like 6 a.m. So I'm clean and jerking after I snatch. And what I noticed is that after I'm just doing singles and they're light, they're just a nice little warm up to get me on the road. But when you pick the bar up from the floor and you put it overhead, I don't know, what is that? Seven, maybe 8 feet of movement. 2.2 meters on every rep and set. That's a lot of movement, and that moving the bar really makes me huff and puff. Little Danny John, when he was 14, said that when he was older, he thought it would be perfect to just, if all he did was squat, snatch, and clean and press, it would be a perfect workout. And it's kind of fun to see this question, Sebastian, because you're saying, if I just did clean and press and snatch with kettlebells, would it be okay? Absolutely. It's interesting because the first actual kettlebell program I did was the Rite of Passage. And it's clean and press. Now, it does say swing, but you can easily just change it to snatch. Would you be doing too much vertical overhead work if you did clean and press and snatch 3 days a week? It's a question. I don't have the answer because I don't think I don't know if it would bother me. And it's not because I'm better than you. Okay, that when I say that, sometimes I'll say, oh, it might not bother me. My structure seems to be able to handle a lot of volume on vertical press and on that movement there. I can handle a lot. Always been able to. I can do a 2, 3, 5, 10 ladder 5 times with double kettlebells, and come back and do it 5 times. So 100 reps in the double kettlebell press, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for weeks, and not really have any issues. Where other people I know just feel like they got into a motorcycle accident after a couple days. So if you have the structure I have, the vertical stuff's pretty easy. Having said that, I struggle with higher rep squat programs because that's not my structure. And other people I say, well, they have different programs. So Sebastian, the rite of passage, if you did clean and press, have a hard day, a medium day, a light day, however you mix it up, followed by the snatch, I think that'd be a pretty good program. I think if you did goblet squats in the warm-up, here you go. Goblet squats and some Turkish get-ups in the warm-up. Just trying to see if you'd miss it. What would you be missing? You wouldn't have a traditional bodybuilding style pull, but a correctly done clean kettlebell clean, when you sort of pull the elbows back in so you can clear the wrists back up, is a pull. The kettlebell snatch, I mean, to me, the pulling muscles get a lot of work. So I'm just wondering out loud if that's enough. I think it'd be a fun experiment. I love 2 exercise programs. I can't do them very long because of my the way this is wired. Yeah, physically I like a lot of this vertical press stuff. Mentally, I like a lot more variety, I think. But I think it's an excellent program. I like it. If you're not an Olympic lifter, we try not to have too many timestamps, on what going on in my life. But I have a weightlifting meet coming up next weekend, not this weekend, next weekend. And after I'm done, Sebastian, I just might join you with doing this. I like this idea. Right now, for a favor, I'm doing a lot of swings for somebody, but boy, I like this idea. Pretty simple program. Clean and press and kettlebell snatch. Pretty simple. Now, if you go to the original rite of passage program and add the pull-ups in, you're going to see a lot of volume starting to show up in the program. One day, the day I did the 75 clean and press left, 75 clean and press right. So clean and press, clean and press, clean and press, plus the 75 pull-ups, plus the finisher. That workout took a long time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ladders 5 times. That took a long time. So if time is an issue, you might have to cut back on, if you did ladders of 1, 2, 3 with pull-ups mixed, and then, like a hard snatch finisher, you'd probably get that done pretty smoothly 3 days a week. Okay? Well, there you go. Those are some... Folks, I tell you, the questions this week were fantastic, and I really appreciate it. If you have questions, send them to podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. I do my best to answer them each and every week. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the questions. I thought there was I could see some connections between the questions, and that's starting to make me happy because I'm starting to get a real sense that the people sending in, I like to answer your question, and then I like to step back and then answer them for everybody else who's listening. And it seems like the questions we've had this week and the last few weeks have been nice, specific questions with general application. And that brings me a lot of joy. And that'll be my joy for this week. And so until next time, let's all keep lifting and learning. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.